what's up? How are you, Mr. K? Looks like we're in a space shuttle, doesn't it? All these zooms.
Yeah, you're looking very well. It's good to see you.
We know what we do, Michael. It's all that yoga, all that meditation.
So
Anything. Good.
I wanted to ask you about. We're going to talk about rage today, and I wanted to ask you what music, what kind of. I know you've got a broad taste in music, but what kind of music or scene were you into before you went to rage, and what were your thoughts on house and techno music pre-rage?
Anyone that knows me, I've always looked at b-boyism as a thing. It's always been a thing. Hip hop for me, 80s hip hop, early 80s hip hop was a massive influence for me. Mixtapes coming out of New York, WBLS, Kiss, all this mad information we were getting. We were getting stuff from videos and VHSs and betas at the time. And I think British culture for us, from b-boys that were following New York City Breakers, Rocksteady Crew, we're getting all this information and different things. And we had certain things that blew up, like Malcolm McLaren, and we would always splice together videos. Whoever had a video player, we'd splice together all of these small interludes of people breaking and the music that was being played. And of course, the curiosity of breaks was a general consensus for us. Everyone was into break tape. We'd practice probably 5 days a week at the youth club breakdancing every night, and we'd always have like tapes with Channel Fox. All these mad Steve Miller Band, all of these mad breaks that were put together. And of course, when you look into the nucleus of that, you look into the science of it, and you think about it. It was only when you kind of sink yourself into the culture of hip hop, you realise the breaks are coming from somewhere, i.e., yourself as a collector of records, knowing where these breaks come from, and you also have a wider perspective of how that sound was brought about and how these urban kids found this break in the record. And I've always compared two records in the mix, whether it was Charlie Chase stopping the record because of his mom's voice telling him to stop, and it was a scratch, and all these stories of myth, if you like, that became the raconteuring of hip hop culture as we know it. There's many stories, but the idea of, for me, it stuck with me because when you're hearing a break, for me, that's the very first recordable audio that was really the first samplers, because you were opening up the breaking, allowing the thing which everyone almost discarded, apart from the live musicians that were playing it at the time, to be at the forefront of the music. To answer the question, the appeal of not so much techno as we know it now, my whole thing is something that's been vastly overshadowed. I love delving into what Saunderson and all those guys were doing, and all of those earlier guys, going, just visiting Mad Mike's museum which is a mile down the road from the Motown Museum. It's quite sad when you think he has a house that's dedicated to techno, and all of the famous DJs that played. I can't remember the guy's name that played on a radio show, but this guy's radio show was playing everything from Kraftwerk to all of these different influences, and it was huge. So it was only on my love for hip hop coming back through, finding it through graffiti and through subway art, and finding it that way, and obviously gravitating towards New York and understanding the culture and visiting there really early on, 17 and a half, 18 years old. The impact of New York has always been synonymous and huge. But the appeal of breakbeats at an early age stuck with me into what it became in terms of breakbeats with Reinforce, which is my university, my first campus, if you like. Mark and Digo, For Hero, their importance. But even more importantly, to the idea of London clubs that were doing stuff. And we're talking, when you look at what all the early people from Dave Durrell and Judge Jules and all those other guys, you've got to remember, in the perspective of it, I get there was an overground and underground happening at the same time, and I was kind of witness to that a lot in London. The massive change when the rave culture came, like, hugely. It was like, for me, it was like this massive wake up call, because I didn't quite get it, because I was so Americanified, if you like, and my heart, it still is in that situation, in that whole entity. But the beauty of it was that I heard within the breakbeat culture, when you look at early influences of what people like Groove and Fabio were playing, they were playing music. They were playing the music that was an underground music that was from Europe. But it was also very much from England in the way that they'd play breaks a lot faster, speed records up, and really, you know, the word jungle and everything else really comes from being an urban jungle. Really, that
So,
was the
so,
first.
so is that what you think gave them the edge as DJs at that time?
If it wasn't for people like Groove and Fabio, you know, the likes of Carl Cox wouldn't exist. I went to Donington Raceway to try and get in on a guest list that Groove Rider had promised Chris for Music Power in Haringey. And I'd given Groove Rider Terminator on dub plate twice because it had worn out the first time, and I gave it to him as a second re-up on a 12-inch. This is this is kind of before I was going to Rage a few times, and he was going to Mickey Linus's wedding at Donington. And I remember going up there with Chris and not getting in, and hearing Terminator dropped outside, which was devastating for me. Fabio told me a story that he was on the stage and Groove had played his first track, and he said, I'm gonna hurt him here tonight, I'm gonna hurt him. And he played Terminate for the first time, and Carl Cox was standing with Fabio, and Groove just looked at Fabio and he played Terminate and it leveled the place. Carl Cox turned around to Groove and Fabio and said, "Where do you guys get this music from? I give up. I'm gonna go and play techno." Now, if you think about it like that, the gravity of that, I think maybe Carl would laugh at that and he'd go, you know what, it's true, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have gone on to be the greatest techno DJ in the world. Groove Rider and Fabio as an entity are the greatest ever British DJs in British history. Period. Because not only did they define the genre, they defined other genres at the same time synonymously. Like acid, you know, throwing things in the mix that people didn't understand. The impact of what, you know, British clubbing was one thing, but the impact of Groove Rider and Fabio, it's only, the truth always comes out in the end. And it's about time that they are cited and recognised, because if it wasn't for people like that, I wouldn't be here.
How did you go from being like a disciple of the club to being friends and collaborating with Fabio and Groove Rider? How did that happen?
Well, I mean, it's the persistence. I'd followed Groove. I'd gone to Rage through Kemi. I met Kemi at Red or Dead. And I went, you know, it was very different. And I still want to go out. And I'm like, you know, I'm this guy and I'm doing this stuff. And it didn't really matter to Kemi because she's like, well, I got to Rage. I was like, what do you mean Rage? Well, Rage on Thursday. It's Sevilia's Street. That's where I go, right? I'm like, I want to go to Rage. And so we started seeing her, and so would take me to Rage. So I want to go to Rage. And I remember going down there and not getting in innumerable times, because they had their guest tickets and they were in the guest queue, and they could bring a guest if they wanted to let you in. And it was just typical London culture that you ain't getting in. I don't care who you are. And it was a bit of a shock for me, because I just had to mind my P's and Q's. But the week that I did get in, and I remember Trevor standing aside and going, "Go on then," like, because I kept going there. You know, he kept seeing me, and I'd be in the queue, and I wouldn't give it all out. I'd see people getting in and go, "No, man, I'm on the list," and then you wouldn't see them again. They'd never get in ever again. And when I finally got in, I walked into Rage in a full-length black goose, you know, and I walked in with this kind of attitude. I'm in Rage, and I walk into the main room, and I'm like, "Take the fucking jacket off, mate," because it was just drenching with sweat, and it was the impact of walking into Rage. There's still to this day ain't nothing that's ever done it for me. A room with a laser down one end and all those people on podiums, and I hadn't seen this uproar. I hadn't seen this massive upheaval. I hadn't seen this culture exploding this way. They were all about the music. It wasn't about posing. It wasn't about how trendy you were. It was just about head down, do a pill, look at, and you just look in the corner and you'd see the silhouette. And they would, you know, Groove and Fabio would play, and it would either be Fabio first and Groove, and then Groove or Fabio, and you could hear the music change, and they would go, "No, Groove's gonna, no, yeah, no, it's Fabio, There's always been these silhouettes. It was like they were godlike, they were demigods for us. But the difference with Rage is that this is what happens when you allow a place for culture to grow week in, week out. But the idea of a club, whether it was Quiet Storm or the WAG, all of these clubs, the reason why they're so important is because it's the idea that music can be taken down and you played week in, week out, but it's how it's shuffled, how the packs of cards are shuffled. Now, the difference between Groove and Fabio is they have 3 packs of cards that they're shuffling at the same time. They're not just playing one set of music. And that's the difference with them, how important they've been, because we were the worker bees that would deliver to them. They've never been scared to break music. And when I say break it, they'll give it to you. They don't have DJ phobia where, you know, a guy plays a record and they just play safe, or they play mixed in key. All this caper that they have with Serato and Ableton, all these other things, I get it. You know, technology's changing and moving. But the idea of them playing records week in, week out, and they would make you follow they would make you understand the record. There is a massive difference in that.
So, so what you're saying, I think, I mean, I knew you as an artist, and one day you told me, oh, I've made a record, you know, and you know, here it is, check it out. But I suppose going to Rage made you venture from being an artist into music production.
Well, yeah, because every week they were playing something. You know, I always say this to people that, you know, what you don't understand. I remember being with Scotty, and he came to Dorney Tower. He just cut Dark Angel. He said, "Can you spray me the label for it?" So I sprayed the label in my paint room in Gussie's flat, and I sprayed the label and stuck it on. We went to Rage. We gave it to Groove. And I remember leaning on a podium, and Scotty's next to me, and Groove plays Terminator into Dark Angel. And I heard it coming in, and looked at Scotty, and I went, "Oh God." And it was a moment of euphoria that never leaves you. And all of a sudden, what you have to understand is that there's a 64 bar to 128 bars where the record's not yours. It wasn't Terminator anymore, and it wasn't Dark Angel. It was this mix. And the difference between that is an art form in itself. That is what it's about. And that culture is what Fabio and Groove have always done. So for me, to answer the question, it's what we all wanted to do. I made the music for them, the yin and the yang. When you design the music for DJs, they're not DJs. For me, they're conductors. So it's the idea of creating the music for them. And that's what's so important to what their impact has been on my music. You know, and I think having to prove yourself time and time again with a record that gets played by them. You were made. Groove Wide and Fabio played your music. You were made man. It's like it's internal mafia with an underground scene. It's mental. I have nothing but thanks to give for those two. And I think whatever you're doing with them project-wise, I think that they should be honoured for what their contribution to British music, urban music especially, to what they've done is just incredible, man. I mean, I spoke to
them. So too. We think so too. Yeah. It's amazing to have your seal of approval. So thank you so much.
God bless you, Michael.
God bless you too.